Hey everybody, welcome back. Everybody, welcome back. Angelina, she's always great, and I'm always thrilled to get any time I can with her and to share her thoughts and our thoughts to open up. Coming up next is a really important session. If you think about what's happening with the cookie, like we talked about in the opening, one of the really critical pieces that's going to hold everything together is contextual advertising. And this session is going to talk about how to build a context-first strategy, which is going to be one of the key linchpins to moving the industry forward. I want to introduce Ipsita. She is the moderator for this session. And Ipsita, she's worked at Mindshare, she's worked at Essence, she works at Publicis, and now she's advising a few technology companies, but she's based in Singapore. And she's going to bring on her panelist, Ipsita. Where are you?
Yeah, can you see me? Hi everyone. Excited and delighted to be here. So let's get
I just don't see your camera. One second. Augustus, I just don't see her camera. Oh, you can see her? Okay, well then I'm going to jump off. Ipsita, go ahead and introduce your panelists.
Sure. Hi everyone. We have two panelists here. We have Arshan Saha, CEO of ZAccess APAC, and we have Robin Zieme from Channel Factory. Before we start the session, I was wondering, Robin and Arshan, if you would like to take a minute to introduce yourself and your amazing company.
Robin, you want to start? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Arshan. Yeah, I'm Robin. I head up strategy for Channel Factory. We are a technology layer on YouTube that helps you advertisers curate where they want to be seen and where they do not want to be seen to their preference. And that's basically Channel Factory.
Hi, everyone. I'm Arshan Saha. I'm the CEO for ZAccess Asia Pacific. We advanced programmatic arm of Group M and WPP.
Awesome. Let's start. I'll just, before we start, let's bring in the context of contextual. I mean, contextual targeting, if I may say, is the OG of targeting. It's been there for years, even before online advertising. That's how, a lot of targeting used to happen in days of TV and print. Even, for online advertising, it used to be the bread and butter of online advertising targeting, but until everything became about individual audience targeting, and a lot of which was done using the third-party cookies, right? In a way, it feels like the current ad tech ecosystem is all about the user and the cookie, but that all is changing very fast with the privacy laws and with the new announcement from Google around eliminating the third-party cookies. That actually has kind of shown a revival in people's interest for contextual targeting. There's a fair amount of buzz going around in the industry. If I may say, it feels like the return of contextual in some ways. So let's start with your thoughts on that topic, that why contextual advertising is now all the more important, given that we are heading towards a cookieless world in a few months' time. Robin, should we start with you?
Yeah, I think that this, context is the new audience essentially for us. We are working with agencies and advertisers, and as you said, it's coming back again, context again, it's coming back for us. And we're seeing a wave of curiosity in the space from a YouTube standpoint. And as you said, Apple and Firefox, they blocked, the cookies for a while, and they've already been advanced in that space. But now that Google has committed to removing cookies over the next 2 years, that puts pressure on the industry and advertisers to come up with new alternative solutions. And we see a lot of new questions coming from advertisers and agencies, and we're collaborating with the agencies a lot to find these contextual approaches to their audience goals and how they can retain performance when it comes to a contextual approach without cookies, essentially. So some of the advertisers that we work with has had this challenge for quite some time, and they're advanced on it, like kids advertisers, for example, that have already because of the nature of advertising towards kids, they've already had a contextual based approach. So they are more advanced in it, whereas others are just starting up, trying to figure out how should I now, without cookies, take an approach to context, and how do I ensure that my audience is the same, utilizing a contextual approach, and also how do I ensure that I drive performance to my campaigns this way. So I think it's a different strategy that we encourage advertisers to start looking at and experiment with context on YouTube as a complement to audience, not as a replacement, just when they've utilized cookies before. So that's a little bit how we see it on a higher level and how advertisers are engaging with us. I'm sure Arshan has a broader perspective on this across the, because I talked on YouTube specifically. So I'll pass it over to Arshan.
Sure. I mean, I think firstly, digital advertising isn't just about cookies. I mean, it's a sad reality, but we didn't really talk about cookies over the last couple of months. But now with the decimation of cookies coming through, all of a sudden the cookie's been overhyped once again. I think advertising is about decisioning, about having the right data points, understanding them and optimizing them towards an individual, using technology and also inventing new technology along the way as well. I think, Ipsita, as you said earlier, contextual targeting has always been there and has been used extensively over the course of time. I think what has changed perhaps in recent time is the progress that we've made in aspects such as predictive modeling, which now makes it a lot more accessible for us to optimize campaign contexts using different signals like keywords, page domains, platforms, devices, channels as well. The other point I'll raise is, as much, to my earlier point on cookies being overhyped, I think if we look at APAC, for example, cookies have not always been as important simply because they've not been as friendly in the OTT and mobile environment. And as we know, APAC is a mobile-first market. So cookies, as much as they played the role, they've not been dominant in the consideration of advertising over the course of time.
Awesome. I mean, that just validates that, there is a lot of curiosity, as Robin mentioned, around contextual, and there is a lot of work happening in that space. So will the two of you be able to give our audience a sense of, what sophisticated platforms like you are investing in? What are some of the new developments, new technologies, new tactics that advertisers and their agencies can, make use of, so as to make campaigns more effective, so as to retain the performance of those campaigns in absence of cookies?
You want to go first, Arshan?
Sure. I think first, the primary main opportunity and where our focus lies is really in the use of artificial intelligence and semantic intelligent targeting. Obviously, this coupled by the use of programmatic technology, one can basically now get a lot more nuanced understanding of content. So firstly, I think using real-time content leads to more efficient bidding decisions. So using natural language processing, deep learning algorithms, and context such as text, speech, imagery, metadata, and geolocation in real time and at scale. This will help us determine whether content is negatively or positively linked to your keywords and ensure your ad placement is relevant and timely. So firstly, as mentioned, better, more efficient bidding decisions. The second one I think that comes into play is the ad experience. And in a future where the industry can't rely on detailed targeting, ad experiences will need to capture consumer attention even more effectively. So as advertisers, or as our advertisers gather more contextual data around user behavior, they'll need to make sure that the relevance is driven to creative. And this is where we've invested in a division called ZAccess Creative Studios, which helps define, repurpose creatives and make them contextually relevant. And lastly, then, I think it's making context and first-party data seamlessly integrated. So as we know, the power of first-party data continues to propel. So by cross-referencing contextual data against your first-party data, it's very quickly possible to figure out customer content interests and create segments that can then be actionable on a DSP. So I think those are probably the sort of three clear areas with AI and semantic intelligent targeting core of it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we at Channel Factory, we built that technology obviously on the back of YouTube's YTMP partnership program, which is essentially a platform that allows us to query the YouTube API and get data points and signals on every video and channel on the YouTube platform. And our technology basically does that in real time on the YouTube platform, probably up to 500 million videos and channels per day, to understand what metadata, what description, what title tags, what likes versus dislike type of sentiment analysis, and also then understanding audio transcription on the videos of the actual YouTube videos, and then analyzing that, just as Arshan said, down to the keyword level to understand, how we can do two things. An advertiser normally sets a preference when they work with us of how they would like their definition of context. So whether that is context where they want to be or not want to be, and we call where they do not want to be, that preference is called suitability. So we then analyze and understand down to the keyword level of an advertiser's preference where they do not want to be, and then we analyze it on a contextual level where they do want to be. So understanding these two things together based upon an advertiser's preference is really important, because then we can translate their marketing values and basically take their codes of conduct and some work that they've done before to understand how they are building their marketing programs, and then say, here is the contextual segment that we recommend for you. And then in addition to that, we understand how each video and channel perform from a pricing standpoint, from a view-through rate standpoint. So we build contextual segments that not only where you want to be, but also that perform for their advertisers' specific objectives, whether it's a back-end objective or as a front-end objective. So in terms of price or in terms of a conversion, etc. So this technology essentially it enables you to do some very specific segmentation. So, for example, when we work with kids advertisers, you can go all the way down to, I want to be in a Star Wars sort of context where we only identify the videos on YouTube that are around Star Wars with Darth Vader, and understanding which video has that type of context. And then we build those micro segments for them on YouTube. So understanding the actual context in real time where they can advertise. And I think for us, what we encourage our advertisers to look at is to understand where they don't want to be, and then where they want to be, and then how define their objective of how they want to perform. So our platform as a whole allows them to solve for that problem, and then get insights post campaign on which context actually worked for them. And in some cases, this is context that they did not envision working that well for them before. So this then becomes a tool for them to revise and refine that contextual strategy as they move forward with their media investments and contextual definitions. So we see, in the future, we see our, more AI going into our platform, more machine learning, so that we can better and further refine this through just more input from their contextual criteria. But right now we're working very closely with many advertisers in the APAC territory to define and analyze these contextual sort of aspects of how they move from an audience standpoint into a contextual audience approach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great to hear, right? I mean, we got two different companies, and it looks like there is so much work that's happening in that space. So all the hype around cookies going out, and people are going to miss out a lot on performance and all that might be misplaced. Just wanted to understand that, are you actually seeing any media spends, or do you predict, more advertisers and brands to put more money in the coming months and years on contextual? And if so, what are the three or four key things that they should keep in mind when they are building their context first strategy?
Yeah, I think absolutely we will see that increase that will come through, and I think we're already starting to see a lot of test work being done beyond from sort of basic contextual targeting that was done in the past. I think going down the path of what must you do in order to prepare yourself, or how do you approach this? I think this needs to be probably broken out into different silos and can't be collectively looked at. Firstly, I think as a brand, we've perhaps, despite all the years that, we've tried to define brand safety or BAV sort of perspectives, brands have still not stood firm on an individual level to derive what is their brand position, what is their brand suitability, and what is their risk appetite. I think this is first and foremost what needs to be done. And then secondly, I think, before we go into even the utilization of context, we first need to understand that contextual targeting is a vehicle of enablement. And that vehicle and enablement can only be utilized if your first-party data, architecture, strategy, and definition is very clear. So I think this is perhaps the race against time for the majority of brands, is to make sure that they've defined, derived, and got a very clear architecture of their first-party data. Once this is done, and we know we've got that vehicle of context to be utilized, then I think the other aspect that needs to be tied in is then creative and creative signals. So this is then understanding what creative signals are there, can be utilized, can be derived, and can be matched for a slightly more, or if you look at it as a much more holistic strategy as a whole. So those are the steps in getting ready and activating. And it's only once probably we've done all of this, then the use of AI can come into play to look at that mass level of data that resides in order to define how can we then optimize even further in order to govern or garner the performance that we are looking for. So I think those would be perhaps those steps of how a brand should think about this.
Yeah, I agree with that, Arshan. I actually also agree with the fundamentals that brands don't have very clear suitability definitions at all times. It's not really the easiest to take those and just translate that into a contextual strategy. We need more involvement from the brands in terms of defining what that suitability is, to be able to craft that contextual approach for them, and also educate them in how they can utilize technologies such as ourselves or yours to essentially get to their end outcome. So I agree that the first step for us is also articulate their brand values and audience, so that we can utilize that as input for contextual targeting in our platforms, essentially. And then that leads to the next thing, which is then selecting the right type of content segments that make sense for those brand values and audience segments. And I think that's through technologies such as ours or others in the industry, where they can utilize those to basically map back to that suitability definition. I think that we encourage, back to point one again, we encourage all the brands just to sit down, work with their agencies, work with technologies such as ourselves to define what that suitability is, because that makes all our jobs easier and helping you reaching your audience through a contextual approach. And then the third point for us is just to craft that contextual targeting strategy with the context of that in consideration. So you can do this at a granular level, or you can do it at a high level, and what we see sometimes is that suitability, meaning where I don't want to be, is a brand umbrella, whereas then the context becomes a campaign specific requirement. So we work with the brand to define, this is my values from a suitability standpoint as a holistic value strategy for that particular advertiser. And then each campaign has different contextual objectives depending on, and each brand too, if you work with multinational, larger advertisers, then it might be that each brand and each campaign have specific contextual strategies because they have different audiences. But we always take the suitability and value aspect in consideration as we are defining that context. And then lastly, clearly define the KPI and performance around that. And I think performance for us also takes in the creative in consideration, as you said, Arshan, where they should send creative signals back to inform the context, and then the context gets refined to drive that performance and work in synchronous in that way. So I think that for us, just number one point, if you're doing anything, it would be for us to sit down with your agency, if you're a brand or agency, if you reach out to your brands and define that suitability, and then from there we can work together to come up with that contextual approach.
That's nice. That was a very nice wrap. Very clear strategies. Invest in first-party data. Think about your creatives. Think about suitability. Create micro segments. There is the possibilities are endless. I will now pause here and see if we have any questions from the audience to build on these areas that we have already discussed. It looks like early morning in Singapore. Nobody wants to talk. Okay. In absence of that, let me ask you one last question. That have you guys been doing any kind of test and learn kind of initiatives currently to see that a campaign which is running using the traditional cookie-based mechanics versus if you do it on contextual, if there is any impact on performance?
So I think the simple answer is yes. We've been doing numerous tests over the course of time. I think the deprecation of the cookie hasn't been new news. It's been there lingering over us for a while now. So I think we have done multiple tests. Of course, I think in different circumstances, situations, and obviously metrics that we are trying to optimize towards, then context plays a different role. But generally, I think from what we've seen, at least for our business, which is primarily brand focused, then context definitely significantly helps in the output of the metrics that we're trying to achieve, and has worked well so far.
Maybe I'll jump in for a second. How and Arshan, I'm going to ask you this question because you're and Robin, you're obviously pretty client facing as well. Do clients know what context to shoot at? Right? Like, I think one of the big questions that I'm thinking about a lot is, there's context, right? I mean, there's always been context, but how do I decide what to shoot at? I mean, what are the questions you're getting from clients? I want to use context, but do they know where to go? Like, how are you helping them?
Now, I mean, I think, let's look at it in a broader spectrum of the industry in the region, right? I think generally digital advertising in the region is very performance focused, and it's very much defined by a performance or an outcome metric itself. And within that value chain, clients generally don't take too much of a definitive view to what needs to be accelerated or what needs to be upweighted within the value chain itself or within the strategies that are there. So I think a lot of that commandment resides within our control to derive that and make sure that we can just live on the performance itself. Of course, on the post-campaign analytics or post-campaign reporting, then we derive to show them what have been the vehicles that have delivered towards these performance and how have we optimized them over the course of time smartly. And this is where then context stands out and gives them that perspective of the value that it holds. But if not, then the simplification of the value chain is what clients are seeking mostly in the region, and you're purely focused on that outcome metric most of the time.
Right. A performance is another way of saying they want to pay the least amount they can for the advertising, right? I mean, performance, right? But the cookie, sorry, go ahead, Robin, but 1 second. The cookie allowed them to be lazy, right? It allowed them to say, I'm going to drop this cookie, the ad's going to follow you, I don't really need to think, right? But ultimately, sorry, Robin, go ahead, jump in.
No. I was just saying that this is something that we spend a lot of time on at Channel Factory, actually analyzing, perhaps not on the cookie side, but which context works for you in terms of performance on YouTube. And it's actually a lack of understanding generally across the advertisers that we work with, what contextual segments actually work in terms of performance with them. So normally what we do some analysis, before even for an advertiser to understand which context actually works for you. And then we present that to them and show them which, not only in terms of IAB categories, etc., but you could also see it in terms of more custom segments that are working for, for their price. It's not only price, but for performance reasons. So there is a lot of work in terms that goes into creating that understanding and showing exactly the context that does work for them, I think.
Yeah, I mean, price is just a medium, right? I mean, I'm a marketer, right? I own this thing called the Brand Safety Summit, and I don't want to spend more money on advertising than I need to. And it doesn't make me care about price. It ultimately just want to spend the right amount of money, like any marketer would. But I have to think about where to advertise, and I think that's the thing that I think people are still need to figure out, like how am I going to decide? Right. And so I think, Robin, I think that's where you're starting to get at, which is, we're going to help you decide. But yeah. I guess the question I'm asking is, where are other clients? Like, I think a lot of these are buzzwords, right? Cookie going away, great. Who cares? Who knows, right? Context is great. That's important. But really, where are they in their education at the moment?
Well, I think, at least from what we've seen, and to what I depicted earlier as well, it seems to be a race against time of what do we do? And right. I think with what do we do, then is the definition of first-party data assets, and making sure that they've got that defined, derived, and a proper architecture for it. And obviously, that's not something that can be done in a short space of time. It brings together a lot of different departments within the client organization itself, and a fairly significant amount of investment in most cases as well. So I think this is where the majority of focus is residing currently, of making sure this is up and running. And obviously it's that race against time to make sure that can be done, and a business case can be put forward internally for it to be done in time.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's how I see it as well. I think it's just early days. We're all trying, but I think that it's just, when I say early days, meaning that people just don't know, right? I think, and I think, we do the best we can, and we'll continue to do the best we can to educate. Ipsita, thank you. I mean, you were great, by the way. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
I don't know if I have any questions. I don't have any questions in here. So why don't we go ahead and end this session? This was really awesome. Thank you, Channel Factory, for being our title partner. Robin, thank you, Arshan from Group M, and Group M of being one of our event partners. And Ipsita, thank you. Great job. And to the audience, we'll see you in a couple of minutes. We'll be starting at 10 o'clock sharp for the next session with Publicis and GSK. Thanks, everybody. See you in 90 seconds. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.